Welcome to In-House Legal Uncovered, a Major Lindsay and Africa podcast exploring what it takes to make it in-house.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Sachs. I'm a partner with Major Lindsay in Africa. I live in Chicago, and I'm a senior recruiter in our in-house counsel recruiting group. My practice is mostly helping to conduct general counsel searches and other senior level in-house searches for all types of companies, Fortune 500, medium-sized, family-owned, partnership, startup, whatever. Welcome to the inaugural episode of In-House Legal Uncovered. I'm really excited to launch this podcast and to develop an audience who wants to listen to it. As you will see in just a few minutes, the theme of this podcast is really going to be candid conversations with leading individuals in the in-house legal counsel industry, whether those people are general counsels like our first guest today, or other senior lawyers, or CHROs who so frequently partner with the GC and are also responsible for the hiring of a general counsel. And we may even have one or two of my colleagues from MLA to join me and talk about their experiences. Okay, with that out of the way, I'm very excited to introduce our first guest today. So if this podcast goes 15 years and I'm as popular as David Letterman, my first guest can be my Bill Murray. I don't know, anybody under the age of 40 knows that joke. But our first guest is Affan Arain.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really flattered and honored to be the guest on the inaugural episode of what I'm sure is going to be a long, successful run for you on the order of a Letterman and a Leno, Johnny Carson, maybe.
I will be happy with nothing less than that. I have high expectations. But Affan is a partner in the general counsel at Kearney. Kearney is a leading global management consulting firm with its headquarters here in downtown Chicago. It has more than 5,000 employees working in more than 40 countries. Kearney works with more than 3/4 of the Fortune Global 500, as well as with the most influential government and nonprofit organizations. By way of background, Affan is a native of the Chicago area. He attended Northwestern for college and subsequently moved south for law school to the University of Chicago. Following his academic days, Affan joined the law firm of Sidley and Austin from 2001 to 2006 as an associate. That year, Affan joined Kearney, back then called A.T. Kearney, as an associate general counsel. He has been with Kearney ever since. He was in that AGC role for 12 years and even served as the acting general counsel for about 6 months. In 2018, Affan was named the general counsel of the organization, and he has continued to serve in that role. I hope I got that right.
That sounds right. Good research.
That sounds exactly. LinkedIn is amazing. So we're going to go over a few questions, but really the topic for today is leadership. And I really couldn't think of anybody better to talk about it with than Affan, who I've known for many years. But let's start with kind of a super easy one. I've told the audience who you are, what your title is, where you work, but kind of how did you get into this position? Where'd you come from and how'd you get here?
Sure. Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, my stop prior to Kearney was with Sidley here in Chicago. And while at Sidley, I was a member of the corporate transactional group, which is focused on mergers and acquisitions and securities work, but includes governance, joint ventures, and sort of the full spectrum of corporate. I loved the M&A environment. I loved working on M&A transactions. I found it exciting. The pace was always fast. There was always something new to learn. So I loved being in that deal flow. I think I also have a short attention span. Just I'm constituted that way. And when you have an average lifespan of a deal of 3 months, maybe a little longer, maybe a little shorter, it's nice to just sort of have a continuous refresh. But on the downside, when you do go from project to project in that way, as stimulating as it is, at times it can also leave you feeling somewhat like a rented brain at other times. And over time, over years, I found that I was asking myself, what am I adding to the world here? Now, I think many people are able to answer that question in a highly satisfactory way for themselves at law firms, and respect to that, if you're able to do that. I wasn't myself. I found that I was more interested in being a part of building something, as a part of a team. And so when I got a call from a recruiter about the Kearney opportunity, it was unique in that it was a ground floor opportunity with an 80-year-old firm. At that time, I was the second of two lawyers with Kearney at the time when I joined, and from there the team has grown over the 16 or so years that I've been here, and as it so happened, I've ended up as the general counsel.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, and we should discuss how you and I know each other a little bit. I actually think, I don't know if you remember, but I met you at I think it was a mixer, an event, and I think you had just finished your stint as the acting general counsel way back in the day, and so you and I just kind of hit it off and started talking like sports and other topics as well. And so we've kind of known each other for the last decade, and try to have lunch, once or twice a year. And you've been a client, and we've worked with together on a variety of different things. So
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah,
And Major Lindsay and you in particular have been an instrumental part of that growth that I described within the legal team. I think it's been at least a half dozen or dozen searches that you've advised us on, and we've appreciated that.
yeah. So let's again, the topic for today is leadership, and so let's just kind of start broadly and get more specific. So you're the leader of the Kearney legal department. What do you see as your responsibilities for the organization? What do you think the senior business leaders at Kearney think the legal department does?
Well, it starts with what the business of the firm is, and we call ourselves the trusted advisors to our clients on the issues that are of utmost importance to them and their businesses. Within the legal team, I like to think of us as the trusted advisors to the trusted advisors. And what that really means is, of course, trust is something that's earned. And for us, I think what really allows us to earn that trust is providing objective, impartial, firm first judgment on critical matters to the firm. And that's a unique position that I think the general counsel and his or her team have in many companies, but certainly in ours. We're navigating, I would say, an unprecedented time of geopolitical, socioeconomic, technological change. We're seeing trends now that have not been dealt with before, like AI, climate change at the magnitude that it's happening at now, increased regulation, this pendulum between globalization and deglobalization, and so on. And these sorts of trends give rise to shocks to the system, shocks to the business. In order for us to deal with that, the legal team has a crucial role to play. Now, as consultants, we're a consulting firm. We like that it actually creates opportunities for our clients and their businesses, and so we help them identify and seize the advantages that they can gain in their businesses by getting through that kind of change the right way. But for our company, it can create trouble. And I think, you asked, how do the senior business leads think about us? I think one way that they think about us is as not just the legal department, but as the trouble department. In other words, they're not looking for legal solutions to problems. They're not looking for a contract that'll get them out of trouble or an insurance provision that'll get them out of trouble. They're looking for any way to navigate through trouble. And it's not just trouble. I think that there's positive stuff too. There's complicated transactions that represent real step changes in the business, and they look to us to advise them on things like that as well. So, the way, if I boil it down, what I do, I think, is really leading a team that that does a handful of things. One is the meat and potatoes of the commercial work of the firm. So the commercial agreements, that's the lifeblood of the company. And I'm proud of the fact that our team is connected to it through every contract negotiation. So that's first. I always put the commercial work first. The second is governance. So advising our board of directors and our management on how decisions should be getting made. And then there's kind of the sexier stuff like mergers and acquisitions and disputes and that sort of thing. And then there's a bucket on compliance, which includes our code of conduct and investigations, policies, data privacy, all that. And then just a sort of a catch-all broader enterprise risk management category, which would include things like a new ethical framework that we've developed to consider our the kinds of client engagements that we will and won't take, our insurance program, our physical security program, and so on.
Yeah, I mean, so that's great in terms of the background. So let me ask a question I've always kind of wondered too, which is, maybe it's a silly question, but in my practice, I'm always talking about people who lead teams, and then sometimes I'm talking about people who manage teams. And sometimes as I'm writing those down, I'm wondering, are these words interchangeable or do they mean different things? So I'm curious, I mean, do you think of yourself more as a manager? Do you think of yourself as a leader? I'm guessing the answer might be a combination of both. How do you kind of think through that?
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I really try not to spend too much time thinking about myself at all. And I think of myself just as Affan. I don't try to call myself a leader. I don't call myself a manager. I never sort of assume the stance of a boss over employees. I think of myself as a partner to my team members, and I work with them as peers. I don't work with them as sort of a dictator from above. Certainly, I do have management responsibilities for the firm and for my team, and that's important. But leadership is different than management. Leadership is something that is earned. I don't think it's a title, even though some people have it as a title, lead of this or lead of that. You have to have people that want to follow you to be a leader. Genuine leadership comes from genuine followership. And so if I have that, it's good fortune. In terms of some of the stereotypical leadership traits, I think I'm lucky. I've always been vocal, talkative, opinionated, very comfortable on stage, but also a good listener. And these are traits that I think conventionally do lend themselves well to leadership.
Yeah, I think it's your point about having followers. I had a boss at one point in my career who was amazing and a great boss, but like everything over time, things change. And at some point, he left, basically under the theory that he had no followers left at a certain point, that everybody had just kind of moved on to different places in terms of what they were looking for. And when he looked behind him and saw nobody wanted to run up that hill with him, maybe it was time to do something else at the end of the day. So that's a great point to make. So you mentioned a little bit of the philosophy, and you said you try not to think about yourself, which is great advice for anybody. When you do think about leadership, and I know it's something you think about, do you have a philosophy, beyond what you already said? Is there something that kind of guides you, when you're having those meetings, either as the entire team or one-on-ones? What's the guiding light?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that to be effective as a manager or as a leader, to be able to have followers in the first place, I think you have to start with knowing yourself. I think that there's self-examination required. You have to be able to answer the big questions of why am I here? If not on this planet, why am I here at this company? Why am I here in this career? What is my purpose? What am I doing here in the first place? And do I believe in it? You have to satisfy yourself on those answers in order to be able to act with purpose and conviction in your work. And then I think you take that same approach and try to know your team in the same way. You have to recognize that everyone has their own answers to these questions, and they might not be the same answers as yours, and that's okay. But I do, in every interview that I conduct with new team members, I ask them about their deep and intrinsic motivations. And it's interesting, Mike, because I find people do not really initially want to answer that question, because it's not a typical question. I think people tend to go into, when I ask that, people tend to go into why I became a lawyer, right? How I decided, sort of the steps of how I decided to be a lawyer, or why I like intellectual property law, or something like that. And that's not really what I'm getting at. I'm getting at, why do you bother getting out of bed every morning to do this? And I want people to really be able to answer that question so I can understand how they would fit into this team. And so, as I said, they're going to have their own answer. Everyone is unique. But I think that the next step is then, recognizing that everyone has their positive and their negative. We often want everyone to be like us, and we just think of ourselves as wholly positive, so everyone else should just be like us. But, we're not either. We're not perfect people. So, or you could say, if not negatives, there are certain things that aren't going to come as easily to people.
Opportunities for growth.
Opportunities for growth, or just, right-handed, left-handed.
Yeah.
You've got a stronger hand on some things, and other things you're going to be able to throw the ball lefty, but it won't be as strong. And so leadership to me is about helping people understand who they are, embrace who they are, identify their strengths, magnify them, identify their areas where they're struggling, and then struggle with them.
Yeah.
Get in the trenches with them and struggle with them to improve and grow together.
Yeah, when you were talking about what gets them out of bed in the morning, I was thinking like sort of people who are mission driven. And in some ways, I think almost everybody's mission driven. That mission might be the company. It might also be, to support their family or to, whatever it is. And it seems like what you're saying is you want to kind of identify what that mission is and then help them, kind of help them accomplish it at the end of the day.
That's right.
Team.
That's right.
And so do you think about, I mean, again, I know you've thought about these things. Did it, when you're a college student or law student or even a law firm associate, I don't know that these kind of things are top of mind, but maybe they are for you. I'm just kind of curious how you came at this. Is this all like a Carney thing? Is it all like the last 4 years? Has it been going for a while? Just kind of curious how you came to some of these thoughts.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't want to sound fatalistic, but I think that some of
Go ahead. Go ahead.
but
Go
I will
ahead.
anyway.
Go. Exactly. We all want to hear this.
Some of these stereotypical leadership traits that I was talking about, um, being vocal, being comfortable in the spotlight, and so on. I think that some of these things they they come to you very early on, whether it's nature or nurture, I'm not sure, but they come to you very early on when you're pretty young in school. And in fact, my youngest child's one of his grade school teachers told me that I see these kids now when they're first graders, and then I see them when they graduate high school because it's all the way through. And he said they're the same people. They're the same people. And so I do think some of these traits and tendencies that you have, it's just that's just who you are. I think in my case, my initials are AA,
Yeah.
and I may be over attributing to this, but I think that going first in school because of alphabetical order really had a profound impact on my life.
Wow. I never know that before. That's really, I truly have never even thought about that. And I'm thinking that I know somebody whose initials are ZZ, and now I'm worried about that person. I feel like I should call them and find
Well,
out.
they do reverse
Oh,
alpha in some cases too, right?
so you're saying the
Even it
person
out.
who's so you're saying the person who's MM is probably the worst. No, I'm just kidding.
M.
But you think that just because even since school that going AA just kind of has impacted you. That's really fascinating.
Well, yeah, I actually, my wife and I had a discussion about this around the time that our firstborn, he's now in college, but when she was expecting our first child, and his initials are also AA.
Hey, I mean, I'm sure if I looked it up, I'm sure there's articles about it. I just haven't thought about that. So that's
Maybe,
great. That's
maybe.
great. That's great to know. That's great to know.
But no, I gave it a lot more thought after, obviously my leadership ideas develop, a little bit more after third grade, and I've given it probably more thought as a professional at Kearney than I would say when I was, at Sidley. I think, being a member of a large practice area, in a large law firm, you don't really think about leadership early on, and through your mid years. But certainly in house, you start to think differently.
Were there people at Kearney who were instrumental in helping to kind of mold you? I mean, you've been with the organization for, more than 15 years. Anybody who stands out who maybe played an outsized role?
Yeah, a few people do, certainly. And I think so much of professional life is about observing and filtering what you see in other people who you respect and admire, and then borrowing those traits and techniques and putting them into your quiver, just making a mental note when you see something that jumps out. So, for example, Paul Laudicina was the CEO at the time that I was hired into Kearney, and he is really a master diplomat, a master of using language, and really, I think, can inspire people with his language. And I have tried to crib off of Paul's style in that sense at times. Our current managing partner, CEO, Alex Liu, who is incredibly enthusiastic, also inspirational. I think I've learned from him that there is a real power that comes from letting people be themselves in the workplace. And the performance that comes out of that is very strong. But even prior to Kearney, there were leaders at Sidley in the partners group within the corporate team at Sidley, like Steve Sutherland and Imad Qasim, who I just found to be incredible mentors and lawyers, where really, if I could only have learned everything that I needed to about the law from those two, it would have been enough. I mean, that's just how good they were. And as people too, just really wonderful, giving, generous people.
That's great to know, and I'm sure they appreciate you paying them the compliment. And we talk at MLA a lot about leaving behind a legacy, and like those people, it's like you want part of their legacy to be that they passed along these important tips that you passed on, that you used in your role, which is great. What's the toughest part about being the general counsel, let's call it? We won't use leader or manager necessarily. What's the toughest part, or what's the attribute that maybe surprised you that was harder than you thought?
Yeah. Well, I am ever an optimist, and I have a bias to be positive, 9 times out of 10, and so I probably had a tougher time adapting to serious underperformance, where I see serious underperformance, and recognizing that things aren't improving, because I'm always looking at the bright side and trying to accentuate that.
Yeah.
And I think that actually the role demands that you do that you really help people grow that positive side of whatever it is that they're doing. And as I was describing before, to manage some of the difficulties that they're having. I think some of believing in yourself as a manager is believing that you can help people get through that. And there are probably times when, if I've erred on the side of doing that too much, where there was sort of serious underperformance. But I haven't had a lot of that, frankly. I'm really lucky to be surrounded by, and I always have been surrounded by, brilliant people who are team players.
It's funny, you said at the risk of being a fatalist, and then you said you're always the optimist. It just occurred to me that half of our lunch conversations are you saying the same thing, basically. Maybe we've had too many lunches, but I do feel like you used those lines on me before, so maybe I've heard that before. But you are, both of them completely apply to you, so I totally get it. What about the fact that you have a global nature to your role? We didn't break down, where all your team members are. I thought that might have just taken too much time, but clearly your team is international. What's that mean for you? I'm sure there are obvious challenges that come with that. Are there, less obvious challenges that come with something like like a team like that?
Yeah.
And I know you're an optimist, so you're probably thinking of the opportunities that comes with a global team, but so maybe talk opportunities and challenges.
Yeah. Well, I think that so much of the magic that happens in a team happens in person. And, there's a lot of learning and osmosis that you get by just being in the next office and overhearing something and then having a side conversation about it. Or if you have a free 5 minutes, sit in with someone else in their office on a call and learn about what they're doing. And I love that aspect of what we do.
Yeah.
So not being able to do that with people halfway around the world initially, I think, felt like a drawback, felt like, something was being lost. But I think I honestly changed my thinking on that due to COVID, due to the COVID environment. And, I think that there are ways to replicate that. Certainly getting together in person when you can, of course, that's a no-brainer. You have to do that with a global team. But even absent that, having video calls instead of phone calls, erring on the side of a live conversation over email.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that, generationally there are some different approaches to that. But I think that if you really know people then it makes it easier to just get on a video call with them, and there you do get to have some of that, and then you can also over invite people to calls. So I don't like to double up on lawyer time on a given matter, but where there's a real learning opportunity, I will invite junior lawyers to sit in, and just take notes or observe or contribute if they can, to a matter that they might not be the primary handling lawyer on, and we can do that across borders.
Yeah. Are you able to, I mean, how many times do you, if you have a report who's overseas, I mean, how many times a year do you think you're seeing that person in person? Is it once? Is it twice? Is it zero? And obviously you're talking about currently, not 2020, 2021.
Right. Yeah, for all of my direct reports, I'd like to see them at least once a year in person. Um, Due to circumstance, I might get to see them more than that. I was in the Middle East, and I do have a small team based in the Middle East, about 6 or so team members there. So I was there a couple of times in Q4 last year.
Yeah.
Once for a large event and once for a board meeting. And so I got to see my Middle East colleagues more. We had a global legal team meeting in Istanbul actually last year as well, and that was great to get everyone together. I do have a team here in Chicago that's about 6 or 7 of us as well, and then others I kind of catch them where I can.
And so, and you report to the managing partner, is that right?
I do.
Yeah. And so you have this role, you have this team. When you have challenges or concerns or issues, do you discuss them with your boss, with a CHRO type, or are there peers or mentors you go to kind of offer guidance on issues that you're facing, and a sounding board for you?
Yeah. It's a really collegial place, and I have good relationships with people, having been here for 16 years. People know me, I know them. So there are a lot of different people that I trust, and that I can go to. Our CEO loves to talk shop about legal issues. Not every CEO likes that. He has his limits. I mean, he doesn't want to talk about them all day, but if we're talking about a lawsuit, he's got ideas about the lawsuit.
Got his pocket copy of Black's Law Dictionary, and
I think he said that he might have at one point had designs on becoming a lawyer. Everyone has probably at some point in their life thought about it, but so maybe there's a part of him that is still trying his hand at that. But he's a thoughtful person on legal issues, and he can be challenging in a good way, and make me think differently. So that's good. And then he has some other direct reports who are P&L leads. We call them region chairs. So the head of the Americas region, the head of the Middle East and Africa region, Europe, and APAC. And I'm close with all of them. So if there's a legal matter that's active in their region, they're great thought partners. And then you mentioned one or two as well. Our CHRO, who I always learn from. He comes from a training background.
Yes.
And so he's just a very expansive thinker, really good sounding board, great listener. And then our CFO, who is a former consultant in our transportation group, who is a close colleague as well. So I work with all of them, and actually our chief marketing officer as well. She's a great thought partner. She's creative and helps me think outside the box. So I have really no shortage of peers that I can go to. It's funny. I was at a general counsel conference once, and a panelist was talking about the challenges of being a general counsel and managing a team. In fact, our topic. And he said, I think when you are in this role, you just have to accept that it's lonely at the top. And I just thought to myself, either his company is completely unlike mine or he's doing it wrong, because it's not lonely at the top at all. I don't find that to be the case. I think it's, there's no shortage of friendly faces around.
Yeah, well, that is a cliche you hear a lot. So he probably isn't the only person. I hear that in a pretty frequent number of interviews. And so it probably speaks really highly of Kearney's kind of culture and your, tenure there, that you're able to have all those people. How do you want to grow as a leader, Affan? You doesn't sound like you're going anywhere. You love the organization. How do you want to grow? What's the growth opportunity for you? What's the growth opportunity for you?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I love my role today, and I every day there's something new to learn in it, and so I sort of in keeping with what I was referring to in the last point.
Yeah.
I don't have sort of my eyes on a different prize. I'm content with this role. Having said that, where this role is going is probably a little bit different than where it's been. I think the nature of general counsel positions in general has broadened a lot in the time that I've been in-house, from being kind of the master of a technical profession to being a thought partner on strategic risk issues, primarily risk, but other strategy issues as well. I am developing my own repertoire in that area, I think, day by day. As I mentioned, we have developed a framework for thinking about the ethics that apply to our decision making around accepting certain kinds of client engagements, higher risk client engagements, from a reputation standpoint, or again from an ethical standpoint. That's something that goes beyond just sort of the blocking and tackling of the law. And I'm glad to be entrusted by our board and our leadership team to take the lead on developing that thought. So I'm having a lot of conversations with our partners across the firm today about the way that we ought to think about our work. So that's one element. I think that there's a lot more to come there. Another is that consulting is becoming more regulated than it has been. Management consulting as a profession is the sort of thing that, it never had a definition, right? I mean, anyone could be a management consultant. You could just hang a sign outside of your window today and call yourself a management consulting. But we've now seen new pieces of legislation being introduced in both houses of Congress. We've seen sanctions in the US, the UK, the EU related to Russia that specifically single out management consulting and define management consulting as a legal term. Mm-hmm. That hasn't happened in the 100-year history of the profession. So where I see it going is that government relations and advocacy on that front is likely going to be a part of this role in the immediate or near future. I welcome that, and it's as I say, that's a growth opportunity.
Yeah. So, Affan, just to finish things off, what's the nicest thing anyone has ever said about you as a leader?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, one that comes to mind immediately is after I was named general counsel here, I got a lot of really nice, heartfelt, congratulatory notes and words from people. But one of our board members at the time, who's a partner in our consumer industries and retail practice based in New York, who was serving on our board of directors at that time, when he was chatting with me about it, he said almost as just sort of, it wasn't a considered comment from his side, but he said at the tail end of our chat, he said, well, I think it's great and you're going to fit right in. Now, that little sentence of you're going to fit right in really means a lot, right? And I think that that's what people want to hear whenever they're new in any role, that who they are is compatible with where they're going. And that really rings out to me as one of the nicest things, because it's not really just a compliment, but really a word of genuine welcome. And that'll always stay with me.
Yeah, that's a great. I hadn't thought about that line being the compliment that it clearly was to you, but it's a great way to end it. Affan, thank you so much for joining us today. As always, it's great to talk to you. As expected, you had terrific insights, and I hope you had a good time talking about these topics as well.
Well, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun, Mike.
That will do it for this first episode. We'd love to get your feedback on these podcasts. Feel free to email me at msachs@mlaglobal.com. That's msachs@mlaglobal.com. And tell me what you liked and what you didn't like, and any suggestions for future topics of episodes. So be on the lookout for new episodes all year as they become available. So long, everyone, and thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to In-House Legal Uncovered. Join us next time as we dig into another topic that will better help you navigate your in-house legal career.